Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, my students? I hope that you're happy and healthy and ready for today's lesson, which is the Unit 2 reading, the reading lesson of Unit 2. But before we do that, let's revise our previous lesson. If you remember the vocabulary, the word that we took, that we'll be taking today: relying, utility, bold, committed, perspective, harsh, enormous, and sacrifice. And these are the meanings. Relying is to depend on someone. Utility, a service supplied by someone, such as electricity or running water. Bold, to be courageous and strong. Committed, to be dedicated. Perspective, your own point of view. This is the perspective. Harsh, severe and difficult. Enormous, very large. Sacrifice, to lose something for a specific reason. So this is what we took in our previous lesson. So these are today's objectives: to list replacement for daily electric items, explain wind energy, find meaning for new words in the text, compare life with and without green power. Have you ever had the experience of living without things like electricity and running water for even a short period of time? What did you do? How did you adapt? Have you ever lived without electricity or running water for a long time? So what did you do and how did you adapt? For example, when you go camping and you stay there for 2, 3, maybe a week, there is no electricity or running water. You have to depend on yourself for getting the water and to deal with your daily needs without electricity. So what did you do and how did you adapt? This is an interesting questions here. So try to asking your friends and figure out the answer. Have your parents or grandparents told you about their experiences? Maybe your parents or maybe your grandparents lived without electricity for a while. They can tell you their experiences. So living off the grid. Living off the grid. You can see pictures here for a wind farm, and some solar panels and some fresh vegetables here. So living off the grid, and you notice the recycling logos here. We'll be learning about wind farms, solar panels, that we get the solar energy from the sun. So what do you think the grid is? So the title here is living off the grid. What is the grid? What does it mean to live off the grid? So what is the grid and what does it mean to be living off the grid? This is a question that we'll be answering later on. So before reading, read the passage and underline ways that your country can replace utilities such as electricity, natural gas, and water from the local supply system. So underline what you think is correct here in this question. So living off the grid, this is the article we'll be taking today. Let's listen to it together.
Imagine heating your home without relying on the local power plant. Wouldn't it feel good to meet your need for electricity without harming the environment? For a growing number of people, these ideas have become reality. Out of concern for the environment and a desire for self-reliance, these people have made the bold decision to live off the grid. What exactly is the grid? The grid, short for the power grid, is the linked system that supplies electricity to most homes and buildings in developed nations. Homes that are off the grid are not hooked up to the local power supply. Instead, they produce all of the energy they consume. As a result, people living off the grid avoid the environmental and financial costs that come with on-grid living.
So getting back to the question, what is the grid and what does it mean to be living off the grid? Again, what do you think the grid is? What does it mean to be living off the grid? I think the second paragraph here answers this question. What exactly is the grid? The grid, short for the power grid. So it's a power grid, not just a regular grid. It is the linked system that supplies electricity to most homes and buildings in developed nations. So it's the power grid that connects home, that gives electricity to our houses. Again, the grid, short for the power grid, is the linked system that supplies electricity to most homes and buildings in developed nations. Homes that are off the grid are not hooked up to the local power supply. Instead, they produce all of the energy they consume. As a result, people living off the grid avoid the environmental and financial cost that comes with the on-grid living. So the grid is the electrical grid, the power grid that supplies our houses with electricity. And living off the grid means that you live without this power net, let's say here, the power grid here. So you provide yourself with electricity with other sources for environmental purposes or maybe financial purposes. So let's continue with the article here.
The key to getting off the grid is replacing electricity supplied by a power plant with a renewable energy source, like wind or solar power. Buildings that use solar power have solar panels on the roof or near the building. When the sun's light hits the panels collect the energy. Wind power is collected by turbines, also known as windmills. When the wind blows, the blades move, producing energy which is turned into electricity by a generator. Some people go even further off the grid. In addition to setting up a renewable energy source, they also have an independent source of water. They dig wells to access groundwater or use a cistern, a type of tank, to collect rainwater. Those most committed to living off the grid may even lack garbage service. These people generally live a life that creates very little waste, growing their own organic fruits and vegetables, and raising chickens and goats for eggs and milk. By avoiding the consumption of packaged foods, they greatly reduce paper and plastic waste.
So you can see here in the first paragraph some examples of people living off the grid and how do they get electricity without using the grid. For example, here you can see the picture in the background using maybe solar panels, getting the power from the sunlight to generate electricity. This is one way of getting electricity off the grid, or maybe just using the windmills, the turbine from the windmills, and using the generator to generate electricity from the movement of the windmill. So these are some examples of how to get power or electricity from off the grid. Let's continue here.
As challenging as it may be to live off the grid, most off-gridders feel that the benefits far outweigh the difficulties. Jorge and Ella Alvarez, off-gridders in northern Arizona, say, "We love being off-grid. It's definitely hard work, but it puts everything in life into perspective. It's surprising to find just how much you can do without. Many people think we have a harsh and depressing lifestyle. Nothing could be further from the truth. We see living off the grid as a gift that has allowed us to be more in touch with nature and each other." This view is shared by Wendy Johnston, a mother of 3, living off the grid with her family in Ontario, Canada. Wendy recalls, "In the house I grew up in, we would leave lights on all day, the thermostat up at night, and water running without a second thought. I wanted my children to be raised with more respect for the environment and an awareness of the impact that they have on it. My children don't take energy for granted. I love the fact that they are learning how to take care of the earth while, at the same time, learning to be self-sufficient." Wendy admits that living off the grid has its difficulties. For example, the Johnstons' power usually goes down a few times a year. However, Wendy reflects, "The funny thing is that these often turn out to be some of our best times as a family. The power outages have an unexpected way of bringing us closer together. We read books and play games by candlelight, or we get together and tell stories." Living off the grid entails sacrifices, and is certainly not for everyone. But for the thousands of people who have made this bold choice, life off the grid is filled with rewards that can't be matched by the conveniences and luxuries of life on the grid.
So as it tells here in the conclusion, living off the grid, of course it comes with sacrifices. Living off the grid, you try to provide your own electricity, your own maybe water supply. It has its own sacrifices. That's why, as it says here, it's not for everyone. So it's not for everyone to live off the grid. So reading strategy here, understanding long sentences. So understanding long sentences, sometimes the sentences are too long, they are too hard to understand, too difficult to understand. So this is a reading strategy, understanding long sentences. Long sentences can sometimes be challenging to a reader. Find these sentences in the article and answer questions about them whenever possible. So let's look for long sentences in the article and we'll be answering some questions about them together. So the first paragraph here, we have two questions. Who are these people? What are two reasons they have decided to live off the grid? So where is the long sentence here in the first paragraph? Try to tell me where is the long sentence. Let's see here together. That's correct. It's the last one. Out of concern for the environment and a desire for self-reliance, these people have made the bold decision to live off the grid. So this is the first long sentence in the article. Who are these people? Who are these people? In the sentence it says, these people have made the bold decision. Who are these people? So the answer is yes, the growing number of people who aren't relying on the local power plants. People are trying to get off the grid. What are two reasons they have decided on to live off the grid? Again, what are two reasons they have decided to live off the grid? What are the two reasons that made them decide to live off the grid? So let's see the answer here together. They care about the environment and want to be more independent and self-reliant. Because they care about the environment, this is number one, and they want to be more independent and self-reliant. So this is the first paragraph. What about the third paragraph? Paragraph number 3. Where is the long sentence here? Where is the long sentence here in the third paragraph? Let's see it together. It's the last one also. When the wind blows, the blades move, producing energy which is turned into electricity by a generator. Again, when the wind blows, the blades move, producing energy which is turned into electricity by a generator. This is the long sentence here. What are the blades? When we say blades, what are the blades? So the blades are the part of the windmill that moves. This is the part of the windmill, you see it on the top, that moves, that when it gets hit by the wind, it moves in a circular way. So the second question, how does a windmill produce electricity? How does that happen? How does a windmill produce electricity? So let's see the answer here. The blades turn when the wind blows. This produces energy. Then a generator makes the electricity. So it's all connected together from the windmill to the generator. In paragraph number 5, this is a little bit long paragraph. Can you tell me where the long sentence is here? Let's check it together then. It's in the middle. I wanted my children to be raised with more respect for the environment and an awareness of the impact that they have on it. Again, I want my children to be raised with more respect for the environment and an awareness and awareness of the impact that they have on it. So the first question, who does the pronoun they refer to? Again, who does the pronoun they refer to? The pronoun they. It refers to whom? Let's read it together again. I wanted my children to be raised with more respect for the environment and an awareness of the impact that they have on it. They. So let's see the answer together. Wendy Johnson's children. Wendy Johnson's children. Of course, he's talking about her children. So they is referring to the children. What are two things Wendy wants for her children? What are the two things that Wendy wants for her children? Let's see the answer here together. She wants them to care for the environment and to know that things they do have an effect on it. So she wants them to care of the environment and that they know that their actions have consequences regarding the environment. Again, she wants them to care for the environment and to know that things they do have an effect on it. Paragraph 7. Where's the long sentence here? Paragraph 7. Again, it's the last sentence. It's a very long sentence here. But for thousands of people who have made this bold choice, life off the grid is filled with rewards that can't be matched by the conveniences and luxuries of life on the grid. Again, but for the thousands of people who have made this bold choice, life off the grid is filled with rewards that can't be matched by the conveniences and luxuries of life off the grid. So the first question here, what is the bold choice referred to? The bold choice, the courageous choice. What is this choice? It's referring to what? Very good. Let's check the answer here. The decision to live off the grid. So this is the bold choice, to choose to live off the grid. This is the bold choice that the article is talking about. Number 2, what does the expression can't be matched mean? The expression can't be matched mean? The rewards that can't be matched by the conveniences of luxuries of life on the grid. So when we say can't be matched, what does it mean here? Let's check the correct answer together. It means that one thing is much better than the other. In this case, the rewards of life off the grid are much better than the good things about life on the grid. So can't be matched means that there's one thing better, much better than the other. But in our case here, the rewards of living off the grid are much better than the rewards of living on the grid. Here is some vocabulary practice. Let's discuss the words with the prefix self. Find these expressions in the article and explain what they mean. Self-reliance and self-sufficient. Look them up and try to tell from the context what do they mean. So self-reliance, it means doing things without help of other people. When you say self-reliance or self-dependent, it means that you depend on yourself without relying on other people. Self-reliance. What about self-sufficient? Self-sufficient, producing or making everything you need without help from others. It means that you are doing your own things without the help from others. Self means a person's own nature of characteristic. It is also used in the reflexive pronouns myself, yourself, and so on. Again, self means a person's own nature or characteristics. It is also used in the reflexive pronouns myself, when you say myself, yourself, etc. What other words do you know that start with self? Other words that start with self. There are, of course, lots of words that start with self. For example, self-esteem, self-taught. When you teach yourself something, it's self-taught. When you look for the information yourself. Self-defense and also self-control. So these are some of the words that start with the word self. Of course, you can come up with much, much more. So after reading the questions here, what are some public utilities that most of us rely upon? From the article, of course, some public utilities. For example, yes, electricity, natural gas, and water. Define the grid. If you remember the second paragraph, the definition of the grid. Yes, the linked system that supplies electricity to most homes and buildings in developed nation. The power grid. How does wind energy work? The wind energy with blades Yes, that's correct. When the wind blows, windmills turn, producing energy, which is turned into electricity using a generator. So, again, when the wind blows, windmills turn, producing energy, which is turned into electricity by a generator. Number 4, what are some reasons people choose to live off the grid? Why do people live off the grid? Some of the reasons. Of course, there are lots of reasons. For example, concern for the environment and desire for self-reliance, to rely on themselves and for their concern about the environment. Number 5, what are 2 alternatives of using public water utility? 2 alternatives to using a public water utility, as mentioned in the article: a private well or a cistern to collect rain water. A private well or a cistern to collect rainwater. You can collect rainwater, or maybe you have your own private well. Number 6, how could someone reduce his or her waste? To reduce waste, how do we do that? Of course, you can answer by growing their own fruits and vegetables and raising and tending animals for food. So this is some how to reduce waste. How could someone reduce his or her waste? And with that, we reach the end of this lesson. See you next lesson, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.